Hello and welcome to another episode of Cram Sesh here on Push Your Glasses Up. I'm Mikey.
And I'm Reena.
And we are going to... Hello. And we are going to talk about the Sam Raimi trilogy of Spider-Man movies. We are doing an episode today for the Sam Raimi trilogy, and then we are going to do an episode for the Amazing Spider-Man movies, and we are going to do an episode for the MCU Spider-Man movies, all leading into No Way Home, because they're all gonna collapse on each other. So,
someone broke the multiverse.
Yeah. So let us start out as we do on this version of the show. This is kind of an open-ended question with this one. What's your history with Spider-Man?
Well, I mean, I don't have a lengthy history with Spider-Man like I do with X-Men or Batman. However, I will say that the first Spider-Man movie is the record holder for a movie I've seen in the theater the most times. That combined with the very first X-Men movie, I think totally changed how I saw movies or comic book movies, because what I understood from the page was finally on screen in a way that made it feel real. Those were like huge to me. Absolutely tremendous. That's kind of where I'm at. I mean, I obviously was much more of an X-Men and X-Men on the Marvel side, Batman on the DC side, growing up. But seeing Spider-Man go woo and swing through New York was like just pure elation, like pure joy for me.
And that's kind of something that started with this movie, so that's a good that's a good place for that. For me, it is one of those, I don't know when, because it was so early. Before the cartoon in the 90s started, I know I saw reruns of Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends and the old live action show that was on CBS. So for me, Spider-Man is one of those deep cuts that is just like, it's just kind of always been there. So my history is just, I'm 37. I think that's where we're at now. So yeah, the build up to this movie for me was probably the most excited for a movie I have ever been in my life, even more than like The Phantom Menace or whatever, having watched Star Wars most of my life too. Because it's just such a part of my DNA, particularly the Peter Parker character. And so seeing it all finally come together and being this version of Spider-Man that was able to separate itself from the stuff that I was the most familiar with, which was like the 90s cartoon and the at the time current comics. I was blown away that they were able to capture that like 60s 70s Spider-Man so well, and it made it feel fresh because it was something out of time. So yeah, I just went from a person living with Spider-Man constantly to holy shit, it's finally happening, which is a big deal for me. So let's I guess from there jump into Spider-Man 1 from 2002, which one of those things where over time I think I've while I appreciate it, I think it's not quite as good as I once thought it was, but it still stands the test of time for being what it is. It lives in the same universe that you could say like a Donner, or not in the same universe, but like it captures the feeling of Richard Donner Superman as Spider-Man in a way that is remarkable. Like I still, as much as I love the MCU is sort of like a wash of different eras all at the same time, whereas this feels like it could be the same time as Donner's Superman, which is an interesting thing that they were able to capture for me.
I mean, for me, it was the first time I think I've really seen a superhero movie where they use CGI to like bring it to life versus just someone always in a suit and just kind of trying to make that work and looking kind of tacky and very stretchy. Um,
What was also, it was only 2 years after the first X-Men movie,
mm-hmm.
and the CG in the first X-Men movie, when you go back, like, as much as I still like that movie too, like, that Statue of Liberty scene is pretty rough when you, like, the CG-ness of Wolverine, like, going around the Liberty spike on the crown, like, yeah.
For me, it was when the cloth very slowly came out of the middle. That was like what sent me. But for this movie in particular, I mean, one thing I didn't realize until I went back and watched them was like just how Raimi these movies were, because when I was first seeing these, I had not seen Evil Dead.
Yep.
I was not really like, I knew that he had done them, but like that wasn't really like my cup of tea. So now, like, having seen those and having seen Army of Darkness and all that stuff, watching those, like, these are very Raimi. These are very, very Sam Raimi. And there's so many elements that were lost on me like before.
Yeah, he took his work on Evil Dead, his work on Darkman, mushed them together with some Richard Donner, and out popped this one.
I feel like, you know, this is like early in the superhero movie game where we saw an actor like Tobey Maguire like get in shape for the role and really try to like embody like a superhero. We're seeing, this is the first, like, you know, we talked about the first X-Men too, but where we see actors transforming themselves into the superheroes, which I think is awesome, like at that level, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know, I thought Tobey Maguire's, I mean, progressively I hate him more as we go through the franchise, but in this one, like, Peter is sweet. It sets up the story. It tells the traditional story of what happens with Uncle Ben, and with great power comes great responsibility. And, you know, we lead off with Green Goblin, which is one of like the bigger villains. And I just think from start to finish, it's like such a good intro, like such a good first movie, and like laying the groundwork and having a lot of heart and not just being all exposition.
Yeah, it's what's interesting about what you say about Peter there is I think Peter has aged poorly in this movie.
Yeah. I mean, but out of the three, like,
he's sweet to an extent, but also still selfish and borderline unrequited creep to an extent, where it's sort of an unhealthy version of what high school or further romance should be. Part of that is the fact that it's so old Hollywood, like the way that this movie is made, it fits for when it's supposed to sort of be capturing. But yeah, it is a little rough to go back on, and that continues through the whole trilogy. So it's not lopsided to just this movie, but I think it is that aspect of Peter in these movies is worst in these movies. So yeah.
I mean, the other thing too is like, Kristen Dunst plays Mary Jane with such a sadness that I didn't realize until watching them back again. Like, she's never really happy or thrilled. Like, maybe like a tiny bit here and there, but like there's always this undercurrent of like emotional exhaustion that only gets worse as the films go on.
Which works best in the second movie, I will say. Like, the situation she's in, while she's not written particularly amazingly through all three of these movies, she is a little more like, no, what the fuck, Peter? Like in the second movie. So like in this movie, she is an object and a trophy. And then in the second movie, a little less so. And then in the third movie, just nobody's written well. So, but the way characters are built in this movie were dated for the time, even.
Mm.
But like right now, like looking back on it, it's way worse than we kind of picked up on back then, just because it was a new thing that we were experiencing, because we were coming off of the first X-Men movie, and then like before that, Batman and Robin. So
except for Willem Dafoe, who is perfection.
No, Willem Dafoe is playing
he is perfection.
a theater villain to the fullest, and it's amazing. It is absolutely amazing.
It is a role that is made for that man. Like, if we're gonna talk about, like, that is perfect. Although James Franco as Harry Osborn is just like why are you there?
James Franco as most things I think we can all account now is probably,
unless he's supposed to be stoned out of his mind, like it just gets.
Even then, I think we can find better people at this point.
I mean, honestly, I almost looking back, the villains are just so well cast in these, and they're just for the most part,
yeah.
Very like, I mean, in that first movie, I couldn't think of a better actor to play Green Goblin than Willem Dafoe.
Well, and that's the thing, like. So, to go back to another episode of Cram Sesh that we did with the Ghostbusters episode, I guess we'll bleed into Spider-Man 2 a little bit here. Spider-Man 2 is pretty much the same movie as Spider-Man 1. Like, nobody really has, like, progressed all that much. But like Raimi did with Evil Dead into Evil Dead 2, he was able to be like, what works best in this? Okay, let's push that. And it elevates it a lot, like, to an extent that is sort of like, you sort of get the mentality of like, can't fail on the third one. Yeah. But the thing with the first movie is like, it has a ton of Sam Raimi in it.
Oh my god, when Doc Ock wakes up in the operating room and
I just mean the first movie even.
Oh, I thought we were talking about the second one and two. I was like, that is so Raimi.
Well, that's the thing, is the first movie has a ton of Sam Raimi in it. And then the second movie, like, because the first movie is still like trying to find the balance of the Sam Raimi-ness with the like studio made, studio written movie that he just kind of directed. And the second movie is where I think he got a little more control, a little more balance. Granted, some of that negative, because like Danny Elfman was like, fuck this, I'm out of here. And like a lot of those like situations where like I think he got a little bit big-headed with the success of the first movie, and then like he still managed to make a tremendous movie, but I think it was detrimental to the backstage aspect of it. But like, he was able to wrangle the things that are him, that are the studio movie, and meld them in a way that like just brings what was great about the first movie and make it much more not even, I guess believable is the word I'm looking for, but like, you buy in much harder than the first movie, because like, I think Tobey Maguire does an okay job being Peter Parker, not a great job being Spider-Man, because he's playing the quips as if Peter's saying it instead of if Spider-Man is saying it. Like, the mask gives him confidence, and so it should sound a little bit different the way he's saying things, but it all kind of just comes across that kind of dry, sad Peter that he plays through this whole trilogy. And Sam Raimi was able to like take that and write, or he didn't write it, but like push the story to kind of like give a reason for that a little bit more. And so like going into, and the decision to use the organic web stuff like plays a part here a little bit better, where it's like it allowed them to play that psychological, like, I'm screwing things up with my body because I'm putting my mind into too much stress, and they were able to like play that out, which is like a very real thing that we all deal with on screen. Hi. Yeah, and so it's interesting the way that he was able to balance all these things out from the first movie that worked but could have been better, and just made them work better in the second movie.
Mm-hmm. Including more J. Jonah Jameson.
Oh yeah,
There's
that's
more in the second movie. There can
which
never be. Speaking of perfect performances.
yeah. Well, that's the thing. The best performances in these movies are almost always the big character actor moments.
Mm-hmm.
So like Goblin, Jameson, I would say even like as subdued as Octavius is in the second movie, it's still played as sort of a classic stage villain. Like he's both Goblin and Doc Ock are Jekyll and Hyde. Like they're both doing the same things, but they're doing things in different ways. And while Ock is still subdued, he's still playing it up. He's still like chewing the scenery, just in a quieter way. Whereas like you have the mirror scene in the first movie where it's a conversation with yourself. It's the conversation with the arms is that same scene, but just played a little quieter, played a little bit more for the close-up rather than the back of the room, which is, it just makes everything kind of meld a little bit more. And yeah.
And it lets the arms that are obviously not there in real life shine as almost a character themselves.
Well, they were there in real life. Those were puppets for the most part. Like 80% of that movie.
I like when they're kind of like, yes, like, hello.
Well, so Melina like named all four arms, and like Carboni was talking about this on the Kind of Funny version of this, and he's totally right. Like he named the one that always does the like, remember your glasses, or like remember to drink something. Like he named it Flo because it was like a motherly kind of personality. And so it's such a like, Molina was in on this. Like as much as Defoe is in on the other one for playing like bombast, he's just like, let's have fun. Molina was like in this without going to the like Heath Ledger in, but like,
but I mean, that's not what this called for. Like,
right.
That was exactly where he needed to be.
Yeah, he found the perfect balance of like capturing comic book and capturing film. And it's something that I don't think most of the actors in this franchise find, unfortunately. Like the recurring actors, I mean, not like the one-off villain actors.
Oh no, 100%. But when we're talking about like 2, now that we're on to 2 officially, I mean, the scene in the train is probably like one that stands out for me the most.
Oh yeah, it is one of the quintessential superhero moments.
It really is, and it's just like it would be on like Tank's Good News if that like happened like today, of like New York coming together to like protect Spider-Man's identity. Like, yeah.
Well, it's a lot. It's obviously, a lot
this is
more
before we all had like smartphones, because these movies came out before
everyone would just take a picture now.
Boop, 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 boop,
but it's interesting because that moment, again, like how I said, like it's the same movie twice. Like this is the bridge moment from the first movie.
But I don't know. I feel like it's even more powerful in this.
Well, it is because like
your point,
the first movie is very much just a post 9/11, like in New York, and so it's like that, like eventually becomes comical in a way where it's like at the time that was meaningful, but it like kind of loses some of that meaning the further away we get. Whereas this is just no, he's one of us. Like the way that the guy that's there and he sees his face and he just goes, it's just a kid. Like it's that like makes it a lot more real and a lot more of just a grounded moment after this big spectacular runaway train scene of like, he is just a kid. Like, granted, he was just like 27, but like Peter's just a kid. And all these people are finally seeing like the noise of like, is he good? Is he not good? Jameson's like trying to frame him as a villain and stuff.
Spider-Man menace.
Yeah, and so they finally get to see up close that he's just a kid trying to make the world better. And so like it is those moments that just live on so much better.
It also goes into like, you know, we get into the part of the movie where he's like, I'm just gonna not do this anymore. I'm gonna just be a normal dude. I'm gonna show up on time for things. I'm gonna do my homework. I am not going to interfere anymore. I don't have to do this. You know, when he's grappling with how exhausted he is.
Yeah, and that's, I mean,
no work-life balance.
As much as it's sort of a, like, it is played for laughs in this movie a little bit, but like, that's still a very real thing. Like, that is a remarkably real thing to see in not just a superhero movie, but like a superhero movie in that specific time when stuff is, you know, I said it before, we were coming off of, sure, the first X-Men movie, but like we were coming off of Batman and Robin before this. Like it was full cartoon, whereas like this manages to capture what people find compelling about the character of Spider-Man in the comics while still managing to like bring it into a modern day, even though we're looking at it as a 1960s Spider-Man, which is like, that is something that like I still don't think they've, when I say they, I just mean like in general, any superhero movie really like captures anymore.
I mean, I think the first couple Batmans really like are good at kind of sticking to like that overall like noir theme, and but that like I feel like it's different because it's like
but that's even
I think it's like easier to do.
And that's even, both of those I would say are even still like more Tim Burton than they are the comics. So like it's not quite as balanced. As much as I love those movies, and particularly Returns, I still think of as like top 2 Batman movies.
It's a Christmas movie.
Yep, coming up soon. But I still think those are a little more like movie, whereas
they
this
feel more adult.
Yeah, kind of. It captures a lot of the same stuff I was saying with like the sets, where like the sets sort of make that movie feel like you believe in the world. You believe in the heightened like reality of everything, and these Spider-Man movies, while a little more restrained, a little more realistic, are still like, that's a set. This is a movie being made, but like it captures, you're kind of watching more so a comic brought to life as opposed to those where like you're watching a movie of Batman.
Exactly. I mean, and they were able to make it bright without being overly cartoony, like Batman and Robin, like you were talking about.
Yeah, it's not like, oversaturated. It's not.
No, and it's not gritty and dark like things kind of have gone more recently with some films.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing, is like gritty is that interesting word where it's like gritty has just become a word for concrete. Like it's just become like, when you think gritty, you just think of like, it's very real. It has the texture of something, and it's like, to me, that feels edges. Well, it feels like, you know, the sidewalk. Like to me, that's where gritty is, like a sidewalk at night. And
well, that's Gotham.
well, yeah, but I mean like literally the texture that, like, if you were to run your hand over it, like I feel that when I see, well, that's what, but like I literally like have that visceral reaction of like when somebody says like it's gritty and dark. I'm like, yeah, the Nolan movies sort of like established that kind of gray aspect to me. And people say it for the new Batman movie coming out, but like the new Batman movie looks like full of color while it's still like dark. So there's a differential like for me with that word. And like these movies, I think, have a little bit of grit in moments. Like in the first movie, the scene leading up to the upside down kiss, that's a gritty moment. Like it's very dark, it's rainy, and he's just beating people up street level. Like that's what people mostly assume as gritty, but like
Yeah, we think of that like for Daredevil or something. You know what I
right,
mean?
exactly.
Yeah.
Like and that scene I think matches up with Daredevil.
But the
And
thing is that they were able to do it in scenes, Mikey, instead of doing the. I'm saying
exactly.
instead of doing it across the whole thing, like they knew where to use it, and like, but it didn't have to be the theme, which I think
Right.
a lot of like comic book movies suffer from, is when it's
Yeah.
like, this will all be dark, and it's like,
It's the
okay.
aftermath of the like as good as they are, it's the aftermath of the Nolan stuff where like stuff just had to be gray and cold for a while, like because those were a success, and that like that's
Or even
unfortunate.
like the only humor has to be like dark or sarcasm, and like that's
Yeah,
it.
and
You can't have that when you have Bruce Campbell cameoing in every single film. Like that's
right.
just not going to work.
Well, and to that point, like that's where I have my frustrations where when people use the term cheesy as a negative, because that just means it's like it's sincere. Like cheesy is sincere. Corny is sincere. And so like when people use that as a negative, it really bums me out cuz like the humor in this movie is cheesy, which means it's sincere. Like they're in on what they're doing. They're not using it to like try to put something that doesn't fit into the movie. So like that's such a weird thing that I see a lot of people now, especially with these movies, try to say as a negative for them is that they're cheesy. I'm like, yes, they're supposed to be. Like they're 1960s comic books. They're of course they're cheesy.
Like
There's like a
you're
saccharine nature to it.
it's like pow kazam, like that's like the era that we're in. With the Spider-Man has a theme song that people play in different versions
Yeah,
throughout the thing.
that we
Like,
cannot escape.
that is
Um,
like, and it's not like a cool theme song. It's adorable.
yeah, and so like it's these movies have this weird like for some reason it got cool to hate them online after a while, and then there's the other side of like I just can't like look at Spider-Man Twitter because it's just constantly arguing. It's the worst. It's like DC versus Marvel, but it's only Spider-Man fans from one franchise to another. It's the worst. Um, but yeah, it's
I feel like we're avoiding the third one.
no. We'll get
Speaking
to
of
it.
movies
Well,
that are
we'll
the
get to it.
worst.
We'll get to it. Um,
I think that's the one we all agree on.
yeah. But like the first movie, I think is a good movie that showed the potential of like where we could go. Because more than the X-Men movies, because the X-Men movies 1 and 2, good and very good, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And then for the most part, not so good after that.
Mm-hmm.
So like while I think X-Men 1 and X-Men 2, but like mostly X-Men 1 was like hey, they don't have to be Batman and Robin. I think that Spider-Man 1 is that moment of like, oh shit, we can go hard with this now. Like X-Men dipped its toes. Like that's the whole reason they're dressed in black. They didn't want people wearing like these big bright
Spandex.
costumes and stuff. Like that's why they made the comment in the movie of like, what do you want? Yellow spandex. Like they wanted the best of both worlds. Whereas this movie like went out of its way to say, no, we are doing Spider-Man. And some of those things were a success, some of those things weren't. The second movie took what wasn't working in the first one and for the most part bettered itself greatly.
The third
It's
one, I think,
even in the soundtrack by changing out Chad Kroger for Chris Carrabba. big step up there. And then unfortunately, now we're on the third movie. And then
all the things that you just said would go out the window for the third movie, including the keeping it very comic booky, because having just come off watching the third movie, one of the first scenes that we see with Spider-Man is he's fighting Harry Osborn, who's on a snowboard hoverboard combo thing, which looks very its time period. Like,
even before its time.
Yeah.
This was 2007.
Yeah.
This looks like 2001 to me.
And like low-key snowboarding through the sky with his like visor, and I was like, why?
Snowboard and motocross mask. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, X Games.
You have 4 different goblin masks that you show in this movie. Why would you choose this?
They show the original glider, which is fucking badass, and then they go,
and there's 2 of them.
Let's use a snowboard.
Yeah.
So I'm like, that just sets the tone off, and like the total wrong direction. And like we see them, they're like, okay, they're getting along. Like people love Spider-Man. Spider-Man is in a good spot with New York. Like they get him. He's not a menace. Like things are going well. But like within like the first 15 minutes, like he sees Harry, and then Harry's like, I'm gonna just murder him.
Yeah.
And like I get it, but like the way that Harry Osborn is played is this like very one note for like who moved, like ever since he like figures out like this that Peter is Spider-Man and thinks that he killed his father, like that's it.
Well,
like there's nothing.
Well, even when he thinks that Spider-Man specifically killed his father, not even before he even finds out that it's Peter. But like I think there's a weird combination with Harry in these where he's not written well, but he's also edited poorly. Mm-hmm. Because like in Spider-Man 2 during the birthday scene, it's like he cuts from like smiling, and then it cuts back to Peter, and then he's like, but what about your friend? And it's like, no. He's jumping too far. Yeah. It's unnatural. So I think
every time he talks about Spider-Man, it's like always and it comes out in left field.
Yeah, and I think it's a combination of the 3 things of like James Franco, not the best actor. The writing, not the best writing for Harry. The editing made it seem like faster emotional jumps than would be organic. And, these movies aren't exactly like crazy long. So
no.
It's, but
and the love triangle just aggravated me. Like, why are we going back to this again? And
well, I think that's the sort of the problem with this whole movie is everything is too much.
Everything is too much. Peter, oh my God.
Yeah.
I like from the moment he's on screen, I feel like I can't stand him. He doesn't listen. Like he's just being such like a royal douche. Like the whole time. Even before like he puts
before he gets the suit. But let's start with that. The suit.
The suit.
I am so to this day frustrated by the fact that the second movie had John Jameson in it. They set up perfectly that they could have had the crash scene that they used in the 90s show. And so they just had a random asteroid fall down and like be a meteorite that hits the park right near them by circumstance. That is so frustrating to me.
That's literally like one of several like just abandon what we've set up kind of moments in this movie.
And granted, Raimi didn't want to have Venom in this movie. It was shoved down his throat by Avi Arad, and so we have it. But you could still find a way that makes it exciting and not coincidental, because everything in this movie is a coincidence. Later on, Sandman and Venom meeting in the alleyway, and then they team up randomly because of that. What?
Why is Eddie Brock in a church?
Well, that is accurate. That is an accurate thing. I don't think it's done necessarily well, but that is an accurate thing.
It's nothing to establish that, though.
I think you see him wearing a cross, and that's about it. But yeah.
But like that's like.
Yeah.
I don't know, and he was just like he didn't come off as a villain as much as like another royal douche.
Well, that's the thing is, like, he's not really an antagonist other than just being annoying through most of this movie. And that's, like, it's frustrating because...
But that's what I mean. Like, there's nothing... He's just shitty.
Yeah.
He's just shitty.
He's the nosy neighbor.
That doesn't make you a villain, just being shitty.
Yeah.
Annoying. Like...
And so, that's what's really frustrating, is because I think in this movie there is a good Spider-Man Sandman movie. I think there's genuinely something in this that is good.
Because he has motivation. He has like there's a core to him.
Yeah. And as frustrated as I was when I first heard that, like, they were going to retcon it so that he killed Uncle Ben, I was like, well, that, that breaks the whole thing.
Yeah,
they could have, but they could have made it work. And I think they generally do with Sandman, other than the team up with Venom. I think overall the Sandman stuff is done fairly well. But it's just frustrating the way that Venom being shoehorned into this movie. They could have set Venom up as movie 4 if they wanted to. Like, they could have had the suit, had Eddie, like, right before the climax of the movie, like they do, have that whole scene play out, have him get that, but then have him, like, as a post-credit scene, becoming Venom. Like, it doesn't all have to be crammed in at the same time. And granted, they didn't know if they were going to do a 4th movie at the time. They thought this could be the ending. Whatever. But yeah, it's just, it's frustrating how much of this movie was jumbled, because if it was just all like fully a mess, whatever, but I can see something in this movie. The scene where Sandman is born is fantastic. That's a really good scene.
And even, like, as he learns how to use the power and figuring out, like, you can see him figuring this
when he reaches for the locket,
and it, like,
just heartbreaking.
And then he, like, gets it a little bit, and then we think that he gets soaking wet and he might be out, but then he figures out how to work with the wet sand. Like, he's learning in the same way Peter had to learn how to use his powers in the first movie.
Yeah. And they could have made a great, like, mirrored movie to the first movie with doing that, with, like, seeing Spider-Man come up, you see Sandman come up, and it's in there.
If they wanted another villain, right, because this is the 3rd movie, they've been peppering Dr. Connors in throughout this whole thing.
Yeah, the biggest crime about this series is that we never got Dylan Baker fully as the Lizard. It's a shame.
Because, I mean, they could have, he was in this movie examining the symbiote, like, there could have been something that happened, like, we've been introduced to him as a character, we know he's missing an arm. Like,
if you are, like, this movie feels like it leans on the 90s cartoon without leaning on the 90s cartoon. Like, they should have done the John Jameson thing where he's coming back and crash lands. They could have had Dylan Baker use the fucking weird ray gun that he uses in the 90s cartoon to, like, try to study something to do with the symbiote, and then it could have backfired, and then that's his creation. Like, there's so much here that could have worked, and they just fumbled so much of it. It's a bummer.
They wanted to focus too heavily, I think, on the relationship between Peter Parker and Mary Jane, and it's just so toxic. Just like,
well, that's the thing, is, like,
it was just like
through this whole trilogy, they never should have been together, like, at all.
It just didn't feel like the storybook romance that we kind of think of, like, Peter Parker and Mary Jane, especially this one, where, like, he starts off being just, like, he's not listening to her, he only cares about himself, even when they have a fight and she's like, hey, I heard that you got some news, and comes in, and he just, like, is an asshole to her, and she's like, yeah, okay, bye. And, like,
yeah, because, like, but
he still thinks he's gonna propose. Like, what planet does this man fucking live on? Maybe this is my own opinion.
I don't know if you noticed this. Do you realize when he goes to Aunt May's apartment, what time it is?
Yeah, like, she's in her jeans.
It's 2:15 in the morning. There's a clock in the background. Why would you wake Aunt May up at 2:15 in the damn morning when you could just call her in the morning and say, guess what? I'm going to propose to Mary Jane. The kissing
Gwen Stacy thing, that's fucking bullshit. that is fucking bullshit.
Oh,
I
yeah.
would not have handled it as well. I would have punched him in the face. Like,
Even
I would not have been
that's
okay
the
with
thing.
it.
That's
That was
the thing
so
about
disrespectful.
well, that's the thing
Ugh!
about this. Like, Peter
He like
isn't.
ruined the moment. He like ruined the moment from the first movie.
Well, yeah, and it's. I get what they're trying to say, like, because they go further and say like the symbiote, you know, heightens everything that's already there. But
He
like,
didn't even have it at that point.
no, but that's what I mean. Like, the baseline is already there, so the suit heightens that and makes it worse, and that's when you get Connor Rowe burst bangs. But like it's so frustrating to see, like, Peter can see the city give a shit about him without going full on the other way, without being all ego. Because, like, that's the thing about Peter, is no matter what, he always takes everything on. So, like, he wouldn't, in general, like in most formats, no matter if it's like a movie or a comic or a cartoon or whatever, he wouldn't become this like crazy egotist. He would just be like, no, I'm still Peter. I appreciate it, but I feel like I don't deserve this. He wouldn't be like,
He would be like, yes,
give me more.
Yeah.
Like, that's so out of character, even for specifically the version of Peter that we have. Like, going into this movie, you have people who appreciate him. You have like Robbie at the paper defending Spider-Man in front of Peter. Like, does he have a big head at that moment? No, he's still Peter, who has Parker luck and things go bad for him all the time. Like, even when things are going good, he would still have 2 decades of him being Peter before that. So, you know, it's just very strange.
He spent 2 movies building him up to being with like the love of his life, and then he's just gonna go kiss some random girl
with their kiss, yeah.
And it's like, he's not that stupid. Like,
yeah.
I mean,
well,
awkward.
That's another thing I should say, that this movie,
he knows that she's there. Like,
yeah, this movie is too much, and everyone in this movie is too stupid. that's the thing, is nobody in this movie is smart at all.
Well, the black suit just seems to amplify how stupid he is when he goes on a date with Gwen and he takes her to the jazz club that Mary Jane works and gets into a fight and hits her. Like, I was like, oh no.
I will say the one thing about this scene that I appreciate is when Gwen notices what's going on and she's like,
and she apologizes.
This is fucked up, I'm sorry. Like, good for you, Spider-Man 3. You got one little moment good. Like, in that.
Women will respect women for the most part, and we will gang up against you. Like, that's also true. But
so as of right now, the Sandman birth and Gwen in that moment. That's where we're at on the things that are good in this movie. Snow Patrol Signal Fire. There you go. 3. Okay. We got 3.
I did like when he's in the church with the bell. He's trying to pull the symbiote off. I did like that because that's when we first see that the sound is what, even though like it's never explained, we just have to assume that. And honestly, if I hadn't seen like the other Venom movies, I wouldn't even have noticed that the bell was what was helping him rip it off. But
yeah, like for me, I just like with that, it was expected because like the marketing had like the poster was a plain poster with Spider-Man crouched on one of the peaks of the church and just a number 3 on it. I know how this has played out. This is exactly how it was on the cartoon. This is how it was in the church scene is a pivotal thing for this story. But yeah, it's just like it was a little wasted in this movie because it's a very important moment. Like that is the moment that he is supposed to realize the suit is what's making him do these things. But he's being a fucking jag off anyway, the whole movie. Like that's where it doesn't add up. Like, it's supposed to be the thing that makes him bad, whereas he's just an asshole in this movie anyway.
Oh, and the dancing. Let me even start with like the random in the popped collar, and it's just like.
But hey, if we didn't get it in this movie, we wouldn't have the reference in Spider-Verse. So
That's true.
the yin and yang.
I felt like he became like one of those guys that like is a pickup artist. Like all he was missing was like a fedora.
You know what was
That's
also
how much I
weird about this aspect of this character was like, I don't think I've noticed this before. I think I just always, in my head, the women were looking at him only like, what the fuck are you doing? But like at the beginning of him doing this, they're all eyeing him. And then by the time he's like dancing man, that is when they start to be like, you're gross. But like, it is weird that like, I guess it's to show like, hey, you can be confident in yourself or whatever in these moments. But like, it's very strange to like look back on and see that, having never seen that before.
But also, since when did like Peter Parker really care about massive female attention? Since then,
Well,
when was that, like, a driving
I
force
do
for
think
him?
I do think that's the moment of him like in his heartbreak, like, yay, female eyes are on me, as like that can happen, but like not this way. You wouldn't
No.
suddenly have every woman on the street like, what, like doing the 80s sunglasses thing.
Ooh.
Like, yeah, so
Hey.
it's, yeah, so much about
Yeah.
this movie is frustrating because like there's something here. There is something here. Unfortunately, you can't do an edit of this movie that makes it work. Because like those pieces are just surrounded by so much bullshit. We didn't even talk about how dumb it is that Harry's like the amnesia shit.
Oh yeah, it's like a soap opera. That's what soap operas do. It's
Exactly.
Like, oh, who am I? What's happened? Which lasts for like 10 minutes, by the way.
It's so stupid. And like, yeah, we're back at Harry's house and we're bouncing the old basketball around. We've never seen a basketball in these movies. Just like the old days, we've never seen it before, guys. Like, it's...
And also, so he wakes up and he's like, oh yeah, my father is dead, right? But then magically he doesn't remember anything about his relationship with his father? Like, he doesn't... Does he not have short-term... Does he have short-term memory loss?
Or long-term memory? Because this is a couple years ago.
Yeah, like, what...
Yeah.
Like, does he not remember what happened now?
Yeah, it's very weird the way this movie handles characters. It's so strange. Like, I think Aunt May is fine in this movie because she's so minimally there that like they didn't have a chance to get her wrong. Same goes for Gwen. Like, Gwen is fine. She's just kind of there. But like,
I don't like that they reduced her to just being like the other woman though, because I love Gwen Stacy.
But it's also unsurprising with how they handle women. So
yeah, which is terrible. I can't wait till we get to the Andrew Garfield ones, because obviously Emma Stone does a much better portrayal of Gwen Stacy.
Yes, still one movie, not great, but we'll get there.
Well, I mean that's like that and Into the Spider-Verse are like the redemptions of Gwen.
Yes.
She is smart and not just kind of there.
Yeah.
And even like Peter makes a comment about how she's not smart, and I'm like, no, she is very smart. Like that's not it. Like,
yeah.
Why are you such a fucking asshole?
Yeah, and like
it doesn't play well against the Eddie Brock thing either, because they're just both douchebags. Do you know what I mean? It's
well, yeah, like that's the thing. You're not rooting for either of them. You're not rooting for Spider-Man in almost this whole movie.
I'm like, you guys can punch each other in the face, and that's totally cool by me. I don't care. Like, I don't care that he ripped you off because you're shitty right now. I feel no sympathy that you didn't get the staff job because you're an asshole.
Yeah, it's that is ultimately, like, as much as I say like it's too big or whatever, Like, that's the problem with this movie, is you do not root for the hero for like 80% of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a problem. Like, not all movies need to have a hero. Like, we just talked about Ghostbusters on a recent episode, and Venkman's not really a hero, but you still root for the Ghostbusters.
Like, he's not, he can be sketchy, but he's not, like, fundamentally repulsive in his, like, attitude. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And the MacGuffin, there's no MacGuffin that's trying to act like it's making him a bad guy. He's just Venkman, and he's just a shitbag. But, like, Peter is a shitbag in this, and then they try to make it seem like something is causing him to do that, when all it's doing is, like, making an asshole a bigger asshole. And that's, like...
And it's not who Peter Parker is. Peter Parker is fundamentally not an asshole.
Exactly.
But you know what I mean? And I understand character development and taking a different spin, but, like, it just seems so, like, off.
Well, that's so the thing, is that's the problem, is it's not development. It's like, not even character reversal. It's not the character. And it's just, it's frustrating. This movie is frustrating to me.
And then Mary Jane is sad again, and, like, I feel for her. Like, and just, again, exhausted. Because even when he shows up, she's like, why are you here? Like, what? She's not even, like, she's past the point of mad.
Yeah.
Where she's just completely emotionally drained.
She's over it.
Like, where you just, like, can't anymore.
I'm done.
Like, it sucks to see a character go to that. That's not a good place.
I'm done. I'm at work. Like, leave me alone. I'm gonna get in trouble because you're here.
And, like,
even at the end of the movie, when he's, like, back to good Peter, and he's like, he still interrupts her shift to do it. It's like, no. Show Mary Jane, like, in her life, not when she's being taken away from her responsibility. Like, you're still making Peter an asshole by doing this. Like, it's so...
Like, I don't like Harry, but at least he respected her as a person with a dream and a career goal.
At points.
In the second and third movie. At
points. He still...
I mean, like...
He still used her in the third movie, like, in a bad way.
Because he's a villain. But, like, when we start off the third movie, he, like, goes to her show. He sends her flowers. He doesn't, like, bust in.
Well, that was them, like... That was them trying to, like, force this thing that they're still friends, but not friends. And, like, where it just doesn't make... It really doesn't make sense that he would be there.
Well, I think the whole thing in the third movie was, like, we're the three amigos kind of thing. But I don't feel like it was ever supposed to be that way.
Well, but, like, even before, I just mean, like, at the very beginning, when he's up in the balcony, it's like, they're not friends at that point. He knows Spider-Man is Peter at that point. So, like, at that point, they're not connected at all, because MJ is with Peter. Peter is Spider-Man. Like, he would distance himself and figure out, like, where to go from there. But, like, yeah, it's... All of these things just become mud at one point, and it's so annoying to me, because, like, how do you come off as Spider-Man 2 and just, like, tank the majority of this? It's so... I mean, I know how, but...
I mean, you could have even added an extra villain and kind of taken the same sort of template again, and that would have been better.
Well, that's what I think should have happened, is they should have just keep the Venom thing in the background. You can still do the black suit, but keep the Venom thing in the background.
Unless you're just gonna do Venom. Unless you're gonna go all in on Venom, and
but
what you do.
I don't think that would have been a good movie to shove it all into one. So, like,
also Venom looked fucking terrible.
I don't mind the general design of it, being that it's just the black suit with, like, the Venom face. In motion when he's talking, it looks terrible.
But, like, when they have, like, Eddie Brock with, like, the teeth.
Yeah, the fake teeth is rough.
Weird.
But I like what they do with, like, the peeling of his eyebrow to, like, raise his eyebrow up and stuff. Like, I like what they do with that. But I just think it didn't. It's that ages poorly with 4K. Like, that is something that looked better, I think, in the time, because it wasn't as clear. But yeah, this movie should have been Sandman is the main villain, do the black suit story, tease Venom for the next movie, which ended up not happening, but that's fine. And then you can do the arc with Harry. Do it better, but you can still do the arc with Harry, because they've been building for that. So you need that sort of the 3-movie arc.
You just reminded me about how he burns half of Harry's face off and we act like it didn't happen.
They do act like it happens for 3 seconds.
Like,
when he turns to Peter and he has a burned face for 3 seconds.
And I'm like, but that's what I mean. It's like, this man literally just burnt half your face off, and you're like this would be like a character moment in like another like superhero movie.
Well, that's the thing, is I think that they could have, if they didn't force the Venom villain part, they could have fleshed things out better that needed more fleshing out, and they could have scaled back on the 0 to 60 like turns that happen, because like there is no reason for Harry to be like, yeah, okay, let's team up. There's no reason.
Also, his butler randomly being like, yo, I know that Spider-Man didn't kill your dad. I checked his wounds. And it's like, sir.
I know it's been 6 years, but
where have you been holding this information? I'm not gonna rag on him too much. That is Bill Paxton's dad. So whatever. You're Bill Paxton's dad. You get a pass. Like, you're just watching like the man of the house spin on this thing that's not true when you have this information.
And lose his mind more and more and more.
And you're just like letting it happen.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much of this movie that's thin. And it damaged the whole thing. And it's unfortunate. It's just unfortunate.
It is, but I still like the other Venom movies. I really do. Unironically.
We didn't really do an episode on Let There Be Carnage.
Yeah, but I don't. Well, okay, we can't agree that Venom looks better nowadays because technology has come up to make him look.
I think
more
the
like
textures look better. I don't think he looks design-wise better. Like, it's just a thing that I have. Like, I am never gonna get over the fact that he does not have a spider on his chest. I'm just never gonna get over that. I'm one of the people who's like, the character is intrinsically tied to Spider-Man. It needs to be there. So yeah, there's things that I understand are unreasonable for me to like rag on, but
maybe it will happen. Maybe now that worlds are combining, maybe it will happen.
I'm not happy about that either. I am. I know. I'm happy for you. I'm not happy for me. That's
you can be happy for me and sad for you. I have perfected being happy for others and sad for myself.
Right. It can be both, because I just that movie. Let There Be Carnage. I think there's promise in the first movie. I just didn't really think it came together. Let There Be Carnage, I think, is Spider-Man 3 level.
I love Let There Be Carnage. I find it so enjoyable.
Nobody is a believable character in that movie to me.
I think that's fine. I don't know.
It bugs me. It bugs me. I don't believe that Cletus Cassidy is a serial killer. I just don't. There's nothing threatening about that character in that movie whatsoever, and it bugs the hell out of me. Sorry. I'm glad you have those movies to enjoy. It just does for me.
The bromance between Eddie and Venom just does it for me.
Well, I think that's the one thing. Like the first movie, I like that Tom Hardy was playing it silly, and that they were going that direction, and then they leaned into that for the second movie. I don't like that they leaned way too hard in the silly direction for everybody. Like, it just it became a comedy. Ghostbusters 2 style. I don't think that it worked. So
I don't know. I'm Team Venom. I can't help it. I don't know. That movie, it just speaks to my soul. That's where I am. I'm obviously not in a good place emotionally.
We are different people. It's fine. We can't meet eye to eye on it all.
My opinions on Venom are a direct reflection of my mental health.
Fair.
Declining.
All right. We are tangenting off now, so I'm going to say probably end of the episode.
Because we still got more Spider-Man to cover.
We got a ton of Spider-Man to cover.
So much Spider-Man to cover.
We are coming back in 2 days for The Amazing Spider-Man and The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I think one of these movies is underrated, and I think one of these movies is rated exactly where it should be.
Yeah, I wonder which one is which.
Yeah. But we'll get to that on that episode, so thank you for watching, and bye.